Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with me, Bill Reimer, your reluctant prophet. You know, what I have to say is never prophecy, of course. It's just observing what's going on and finding data to substantiate it, because you can't manage what you don't measure. So why aren't our governments measuring all the very many things that they claim that they're attempting to manage? The saying you cannot manage what you do not measure is often associated with management expert Peter Drucker, but the principle predates Drucker by some 2,000 years. An example of measured success is Japan's path from post-war devastation to an export powerhouse. It involved many important factors, a lot of hard work, and a statistician. Two Americans played key roles and the world's greatest economic recovery story, a story that altered lifestyles and reinvented production systems around the world. They were General Douglas MacArthur and quality guru Dr. W. Edwards Deming. MacArthur's greatest contribution as Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers between 1945 and 1951 as de facto dictator was to break apart an outdated and ossified economic and social structure, which allowed Japan's inherent creativity to blossom. This was all very important for the development of Japan's post-war economy, said Masayoshi Tsurimi, an economics professor and financial historian at Hosei University. On the corporate front, MacArthur smashed the grip of Japan's family trusts, something Canadians are all too familiar with, given the fact that Justin Trudeau's only qualification as Prime Minister is the name of his father. In Japan, these trusts were known as zaibatsu, which had dominated Japan's economy for decades, and sent their avaricious tentacles into every corner of economic life, just as Justin has done here. Although some survived in modified form, including Mitsui, Mitsubishi, and Sumitomo, the retrenchment opened the field to a new breed of innovators with names like Sony, Honda, Toyota, Panasonic, that would, over the next 30 years, catapult Japan onto the global stage. On the labor front, MacArthur encouraged trade unions, which further checked the oligopolies, broadened Japan's wealth distribution, and helped develop an increasingly affluent middle class that would serve as a domestic base for exporters. And his farm reform policies, arguably his most far-reaching achievement, blunted the sort of rural discontent that would soon spring Mao Zedong to power in neighboring China, argued MacArthur biographer William Manchester in American Caesar. But most importantly, in terms of viable, verifiable production improvements, MacArthur unleashed Dr. Deming to assist Toyota in inventing tools which would permit those involved in production on the shop floor level to effect change in production issues as they were being encountered. Some of these include the Plan, Do, Study, Act improvement cycle, control charts, 5 Whys, Pareto analysis, among many others. Deming transformed the factory by empowering the worker, by providing him with tools and information to do his or her job correctly the first time. Moreover, to react to problems with Team Kaizen efforts which would solve quality issues at their source as they occurred. Thus, the Toyota production system was born, which became the gold standard for process improvement and measurable success throughout the entire world. In appreciation, the Japanese created the Deming Prize, which is the longest running and one of the highest quality awards in the world. It recognizes both individuals for their contributions to the field of quality in business that have successfully implemented exemplary systems that promote quality of goods and services. It was established in 1951 to honor W. Edwards Deming, who contributed greatly to Japan's proliferation of statistical quality control after World War II. His teachings helped Japan build its foundation, by which the level of Japan's product quality has been recognized as the highest in the world. Was originally designed to reward Japanese companies for major advances in quality improvement. Over the years, it has grown, under the guidance of the Japanese Union of Scientists and Engineers, to where it is now also available to non-Japanese companies. I met with the leader of Tata in the States to talk about him hiring me for some quality improvement issues, and he told me how he led Tata Steel through to the first company ever outside of Japan to win a Deming Award. And he told me this, that it didn't matter that they won the award at the end of the process, that so much good had been done to Tata Steel in quality improvement that the award was just like icing on the cake. Over the years, it has grown and let me get to where I was. Where it is now available to non-Japanese companies like Tata, albeit usually operating in Japan, and also to individuals recognized as having made major contribution to the advancement of quality. The awards ceremony is broadcast every year in Japan on national television. Two categories of the awards are made annually, the Deming Prize for individuals and the Deming Prize. Yet we live in an age of the totalizing enterprise of ever-expanding government intervention and bureaucracy. While in the face of the increase in state intervention, there are almost no methods to verify the successes and failures of taxpayer-funded programs. Over 70 plus years after Deming helped revive the Japanese economy, our own leaders have forgotten the importance of measurable success. So let's examine several of the reasons why governments often fail to measure the success of expensive programs. 1. Groupthink and echo chambers. Decision-making groups with limited perspectives can fall into the trap of groupthink, where countervailing evidence is filtered out of discussions and warning signs about potential pitfalls in a policy are ignored. This can lead to an overemphasis on certain pieces of evidence that support the preferred policy while ignoring others. 2. Short institutional memories and high staff turnover. High staff turnover can lead to short institutional memories, limiting the capacity for learning because the lessons of the past are quickly forgotten. This can be particularly problematic in democratic governance where high churn among politicians is inevitable. 3. Overly rigid hierarchies and inward-looking institutions. Institutions with low levels of accountability, where people lower down a decision chain, fear speaking out against a policy orthodoxy, tend to make more policy mistakes. 4. Bias towards project and product success. Organizations often have a bias toward measuring project and product success rather than a broader view of success as problems are solved with development impact. 5. Complexity of measuring success. The complexity of measuring success can also be a factor. For example, even when billions of dollars spent on weatherization, it's still unclear just how much good this approach to energy efficiency has accomplished. Why? Of course, because it's part of the climate catastrophizing initiative. So, in particular, socialist governments are often the leaders of the inefficiency pack. So let us examine several reasons as to why socialist governments may not measure the success of their programs. First, complexity of central planning. Under central planning, There is no profit and loss system of accounting to accurately measure the success or failure of various programs. Without profits, there is no way to discipline firms that fail to serve the public interest and no way to reward firms that do. 2. Inefficiency and misallocation of labor. Under socialist planning, government commands were used to allocate employment and therefore did not permit the hiring or firing of workers for strictly economic reasons. The problem with this was inefficient production, underemployment, and misallocation of labor. 3. Lack of democratic legitimacy. Some countries featuring strong roles of the government in the economy, but because of the lack of democratic legitimacy, they do not serve the will of society. 4. Modern economies are too complex to plan. The Soviet disaster shows that modern economies are far too complex to plan. State ownership and scientific planning would replace the anarchy of the market. However, the complexity of modern economies makes it difficult to plan and measure the success of programs. Nothing understands the market like the market itself, and the market must decide. Now consider the following measurements coming out of Florida on vaccine injuries, given what its Surgeon General has just announced, namely that there are bits of DNA in the mRNA protocol, and that the mRNA is allowing that DNA to enter our cells and alter our genetic code. In Florida alone, there was a 1,700% increase in VAERS reports after the release of the COVID-19 vaccine, compared to an increase of 400% in overall vaccine administration for the same time period. And it refers to figure 1. I provide the figures in the blog. You'll have to look at the blog to see the figures for yourself. I also provide the link to the web page. The reporting of life-threatening conditions increased over 4,400%. This is a novel increase and was not seen during the 2009 H1N1 vaccination campaign. There is a need for additional unbiased research to better understand the COVID-19 vaccine's short and long-term effects. The findings in Florida are consistent with various studies that continue to uncover such risks. To further evaluate this, the Surgeon General wrote a letter to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, illustrating the risk factors associated with the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines and emphasizing the need for additional transparency. According to a study, exit disclaimer Icon Freeman, J. al. Vaccine 2022, mRNA COVID-19 vaccines were associated with an excess risk of serious adverse events, including coagulation disorders, acute cardiac injuries, Bell's palsy, and encephalitis. The risk was 1 in 550 individuals, which is much higher than other vaccines. A second study, and I won't read the disclaimer, found increased acute cardiac arrest and other acute cardiac events following mRNA COVID-19 vaccination. Addiction, and I won't read that exit disclaimer, assess the risk of thromboembolic and thrombocytopenic events related to COVID-19 vaccines and found preliminary evidence of increased risk of both coronary disease and cardiovascular disease. While the CDC has identified safety signals for stroke among individuals 65 and older following the bivalent booster administration, there is a need for additional assessments and research regarding safety of all mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. To support transparency, the state of Florida reminds healthcare providers to accurately communicate the risks and benefits of all clinical interventions to their patients, including those associated with COVID-19 vaccine, as additional risks continue to be identified and disclosed to the public. The state of Florida remains dedicated to protecting communities from the risks of COVID-19 and other public health concerns, specifically by promoting the importance of treatment and promoting prevention through healthy habits. We encourage our healthcare partners and providers to do the same. If the Surgeon General of Florida, that's the end from that webpage, which I provide you the link to, so you may read it for yourself. Now, my summating thoughts. If the Surgeon General of Florida assessment is accurate, the data indicates crimes against humanity being perpetrated by governments all throughout the Western world. I suppose that is as good a reason as any for the politicians and bureaucrats not to want people to know what has actually transpired, which continues unabated and unchecked by the vast majority of global leaders. Look at the following web page and tell me if you do not think there is something odd about its findings. You may access it for yourself at the following link, which I provide in the notes in the blog. If you're listening to this on YouTube, simply click on the link to the blog and it will take you to the blog where you can open this link for yourself. Finally, it is time for a little quality control of the delusional ideationists whom we have entrusted with our health. We, like MacArthur, need to smash the grip of the globalist trusts and multinational conglomerates who are experimenting with a human genetic blueprint, because these oligarchs are transhumanists who detest their fellow man. If that isn't something to think and pray about, I don't know what is. It's up to us to stop it. These oligarchs aren't about to stop themselves. They're in bed with communist China, with investment bankers, with big pharma. Multinational conglomerates are literally, they bought and paid for our politicians and our bureaucrats. So, pray with me and pray that some real accurate measuring be made public knowledge. God bless you. Thank you for listening.